We are pleased at this point to welcome our final fireside chat. It will be hosted by the moderator, Chip Getzinger. He is the Solutions Director at Automobility Advisors. He is also a former moderator in this room, so bear with me as I reintroduce him to you. He is a seasoned executive and strategic leader in connected vehicle technologies with over a decade of experience spanning OEMs, Tier 1s, and startups. He is the Solutions Director at Automobility Advisors, providing expert guidance on strategy, business development, and project management in the connected mobility space. He has held key leadership roles at SiriusXM Connected Vehicles and Nissan North America, where he played a foundational role in shaping the connected service and automotive and automation innovation. With degrees in computer science from MIT and an MBA from Northwestern's Kellogg School, he brings deep technical expertise to moderate our panel this afternoon. We are pleased to welcome him for the Elevating and Driving an Experience with Superior UX, our final session this afternoon here in Experience. Welcome, Chip, and then he'll introduce the panel.
Thanks so much, Denise. Appreciate it, and appreciate all of you sticking it out into the final panel of the final day at Autotech. So fantastic, wonderful to have you all here. As Denise said, I'm Chip Getzinger. I'm the Solutions Advisor at Automobility Advisors. I won't repeat all the lovely things that Denise has said about me, but Automobility Advisors is a boutique consultancy that works in the connected mobility space. We provide services from business development to strategy to program delivery for everybody from OEMs to startups. So happy to be here, and I'm super excited to have our panel here today to talk about elevating the driving experience with superior UX. I'll start here to my right with Shruti. Shruti is a senior UX designer at Honda who works on designing thoughtful, user-friendly experiences for in-vehicle technologies, brings a practical lens to how design can support drivers in their everyday journeys. So Shruti, you want to introduce yourself a little bit further?
Thanks, Jeff. This has been a nice, great experience listening on great talks and then participating with other field experts here and understand how we should take this new SDV AI field forward, especially how it affects the UX. So I'm looking forward to a great chat with you.
Great, thanks. And also, please welcome Paul Miller, the CTO at Aptiv subsidiary Wind River. He's a global leader in mission-critical intelligence systems and edge-to-cloud software. Paul's got nearly 3 decades of leadership across telecom and advanced technologies, including real-time operating systems, 5G cloud infrastructure, and AI. Paul's helping Aptiv and its customers shape the future of software-defined vehicles and connected systems across sectors, including automotive, aerospace and defense, telecommunications, and enterprise, just to name a few. So welcome, Paul, and if you'd like to introduce yourself a little further.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chip. And I'll say with the resume that she introduced you with, I feel like we need to switch spaces and we can interview you instead. No, I think at Wind River, we have a really exciting time going on. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Aptiv, which, as many of you know, is a huge vendor in the automotive space. And they acquired our company because of all the work we're doing in software-defined platforms, right? And obviously, as the automotive industry moves more towards software-defined vehicles and changes the architecture of the vehicle, we're actually taking a lot of technology that we built from the aerospace industry probably 15, 20 years ago when they up-integrated their compute platforms on the aircraft. And so we're able to take some of that technology and bring it to the automotive sector, as well as being in the automotive sector for over 20 years. And the company's about 40 years old. So really excited to be here today and talk about some of the things we're doing.
Great. Thanks so much. So let's dive on in and talk. So first thing we wanted to open up with is let's talk a little bit about advanced infotainment systems and autonomous vehicle controls. How can we use those, and how do they contribute to a smoother, a more intuitive driving experience, an experience that's better for the customer? So Shruti, you want to start with this one?
Okay, there's a lot to unpack on that.
Fantastic. Let's unpack it.
SDV and autonomous vehicles, and then how do we get to a smooth, seamless experience? I think we have to, again, I bring in the customer UI perspective on this. Understanding the user in different driving scenarios, what it can help them, the different driving contexts and how these technologies can help will, I think, drive better solutions. For example, a driver in a urban city environment has a different cognitive load. The needs for different situation awareness are different. Same thing if you were to on a long drive, your probably drowsy or bored. What can you do? How can technology help in that situation? So I think it's important to think about this individual experiences and see how technology can help them in those cases, and both improve the experience, keep them safe. That's always the focus.
I think it's a great point that the technology, it's two-way, right? It's not just the vehicle and systems communicating with the customer, but it's also getting information about the customer and the context, right? So what they're doing, what the driving scenario is.
How it can adapt itself.
Absolutely.
I think that's the challenge for us now, or that's the exciting part, where it can be more proactive and do something even before the customer can realize and support them. And that, I think, is a direction towards seamless experience that we should work.
No, fantastic, thanks. And Paul, the delivering that kind of an experience, a more intuitive, natural customer experience with these technologies, there's a lot of work that goes into building out a system that can do that. Maybe you talk a little bit to that.
Yeah, sure. And I think it's really interesting when you look at the huge amount of technology that we're applying to the problem here, right? And we're trying to make that huge amount of technology very human-centric and very natural for a user to experience. At Aptiv, we have a 6th-generation ADAS system, and that ADAS system is using artificial intelligence and machine learning, and is really a radar-focused implementation of ADAS. And we believe in that in addition to cameras and sensor fusion, because it gets a more human-centric perspective as to how a driver actually operates a vehicle. The end result of that is when a user experiences our ADAS system, it feels like a human being driving, right? And I think that's a major thing here, that a lot of this technology that we're bringing together, if we look at ADAS, autonomous driving systems, is designed to mimic the way a human would behave so that the user in the vehicle is more comfortable, right? As soon as a vehicle behaves in an aberrant way that doesn't feel, a little jerk of the steering wheel or whatever, it doesn't feel natural and normal. So when we talk about user interface, it's not just about the cockpit dashboard, it's about how you feel when you drive the car. And the ADAS system has a huge impact on that. Then as we look at the driver cockpit, right, the kind of other part of the question that you mentioned, that user interface experience is becoming more and more modern. And we're also using AI in that environment. We're using in-cabin monitoring to sense the emotions of the driver and have that influence what they're experiencing in the vehicle with climate control and the environment inside the car. And then finally, what's really interesting at Aptiv is we've now combined these into a unified digital cockpit. And the idea here is taking the in-cabin infotainment system, combining it with the ADAS system, and having messaging going between them in a way that can affect the safety-critical algorithms that are running in the ADAS system. So, for example, you may have a navigation change that the user implements through the interface. You may want that event to then inform the ADAS system to change the behavior that it's having as it routes and drives through the traffic. So as we look at this is a very complex system picture that I just created, but the ideal goal here is to achieve one that is more human in its behavior. And that, in the end, results in the best possible product for the industry.
I think that's a good point. And one thing I do want to add is, as we're building these systems, it's very important to communicate intent. The issue is not that the system can drive. It probably can do much better than what the driver can do, and it can sense the system. It has much more data. But I think where we need to kind of work on is communicating that intent of what it's doing to the driver so that they are comfortable to trust it. I think much of this mismatch or break-in experience happens when they really don't trust it, even though it is doing the right thing. So at all times, we should keep that communication channel going with the driver, even if we achieve high levels of autonomy and vehicle can do more things.
You also mentioned data in what you just described, and I think that's really important as well, because one of the things here, as you see from this event, over the past couple of days, the connected vehicle has emerged, right? It is the new paradigm. We're no longer thinking of a car as a singular element. It's part of a system, right? It's connected to OTA and compute offload and CV2X and all these sort of things. And a piece of that is extracting data from the vehicle, learning from that information, and then updating the software in the car. And that kind of closed loop behavior is really important, because as we look to improve the algorithms in the car, whether they're ADAS algorithms or in-vehicle infotainment systems, the ability to learn from what we're collecting from data from fleets of vehicles, adjust our algorithms, go through a DevOps tool chain, and then drive that information back down into the car. Now the customer is experiencing a continuously improving experience in their car, to say nothing of what we can do for monetization through new applications and that sort of thing. So I think all is part of your question about getting this to be a more natural human environment that people are comfortable in. It requires these type of systems and designs in order to achieve that.
And I think that updatability is, a really critical, that continuous learning loop, improvement loop is critical to this. And there's the, I'll call it more of the, I guess static's probably not the right word, but the, kind of baseline. But then there's also the dynamic reactions. So you talk about it being a natural experience for, it's going to drive like a person. Well, a person drives differently in different scenarios, right? So as you talk about understanding the customer, whether it be from the DMS or other systems, understanding the context is important because, any one of us driving in a traffic jam is going to drive differently than, if we're cruising the back roads on a weekend, right? So,
Well, and then you might see in-cabin monitoring, noticing the stress of a driver, and adjust the algorithm to be a little bit more relaxed, right, in its lane-changing behavior and things like that, versus a passenger or driver that seems completely relaxed. Perhaps the system can become more aggressive and get you to your destination earlier. So it's a lot of closed loop and a lot of AI and machine learning that we're trying to employ here to get this to an environment that feels more human, right, to be part of.
yeah, that's fantastic. And as you talk about this continuous learning and improvement of the algorithms in the vehicle, one of the other things that leads to is vehicles today are staying on the road longer and longer. And any one of us may have had an experience, at least those of us who have been around a little bit longer, when car phones were first a thing, and they would embed car phones, and you'd go buy, maybe a used Mercedes several years later when car phones were no longer a thing, and it's got this now vestigial, appendix in the...
Yeah, the StarTAC.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, that's no longer useful. But being able to update the vehicle and to continually improve these algorithms can go a long way towards extending the useful life cycle of a vehicle, as well as continuing to keep it fresh, interesting, and continue to make it an ever better driving experience for the customer, for the 7, 10 plus years that this vehicle is going to be on the road, whether it's first driver or subsequent drivers.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to realize that a vehicle that used to ship out of the manufacturer, the automotive OEM, used to leave as a widget and would never change, right? And that is radically transformed now with a connected vehicle and a software-defined vehicle. That vehicle, throughout its entire life cycle that the people own it, is continuously evolving as software changes. And that also creates a platform for automotive to generate more revenue by being able to deploy more software services to that vehicle and monetize them. So, we kind of look at that as the Apple App Store, right, of the car. But there are other ways that will become monetized that customers are willing to pay for, or automotive OEMs are willing to fund to be more competitive against their competition. There's a variety of different business models there, but none of that happens without, OTA.
I mean, to add to that is also the expectation of the customer, like the rest of their digital lives. It's normal to start in one place, but it's continuously improving. It's not just about fixing a problem. In fact, it's becoming a better version, be it their phone, TVs. And I think the expectation will come into the vehicles that it has to offer more as more other aspects of their digital life is improved. We have to be in sync with that. So it's not just, bug fixes or something, that's not working is not okay, but you have to go a step further and offer something new. And then the other thing here is we have now an opportunity to actually listen to our customers, and maybe we offer up new experience based on our customers. So then you have this level of engagement and more loyalty to the OEMs that, my company kind of listens to what I need and they're delivering services. And I think this platform affords all those new opportunities.
Yeah, so what are some of the unique challenges in being able to deliver that sort of ever-refreshed, ever-improving UX experience for a customer, and how are you going about addressing those?
Yeah, I think this is a pretty exciting space for my company in that, kind of as I indicated in the introduction, we have some experience in other industries. And Wind River as a company is working in aerospace and defense and industrial and medical and automotive and telecommunications. And so we see these software transformations happening in these industries at different times. For example, if you look at telecommunications and enterprise, they adopted cloud-native principles 10 years ago, right? If you look at aerospace and defense, they did up integration 15, 20 years ago. And now the automotive industry can learn from these things and can use technologies that have been proven for literally over a decade in some of these other industries. And for example, as we look at the software-defined vehicle, we say, okay, from this conversation we just had, we believe that a connected car and over-the-air updates and learning from data coming from the vehicle, that closed-loop behavior is critical to the evolution of the automobile industry, okay? I think that's foundationally assumed as you walk through the show floor today. This is the expectation this industry has, and it's the correct expectation as a software-defined system. But then you look at the internal architecture of the car. What are you actually building for a software-defined vehicle, for software? It has to support that thesis, right? And the way that that happens is largely through modularity. And in the older days, we used to talk about SOA as the way to do that. In the more modern implementations, we're using cloud-native principles, containers, this sort of thing. This is very exciting because if you move to that type of cloud-native containerized architecture in the vehicle, what you'll end up with is the ability to just change components within the vehicle, just add an application without changing the entire monolithic software stack. Your downloads to the vehicle become smaller. Your impacts to the vehicle become smaller. In fact, in a cloud-native implementation, these containers are ephemeral, right? They may spawn into existence to run a certain function and then terminate, right? And this is much more the way a data center works today. And so I think the car of the future is really a data center on wheels, right? It's using cloud-native principles. And so a lot of the software that Wind River provides into the software-defined vehicle market is mixed criticality hypervisors, safety certifiable real-time OSs, Linux, Android, Kubernetes infrastructure to enable you to build the type of system I'm describing. Now, you implement that, that's a foundational platform in a vehicle that may be zonal compute or may not, right? But depending on what you're trying to build. As you build that, now the applications come in. We talk about the UX implementations or the ADAS algorithms or all the critical functions that operate for body control in the vehicle. Now they're all containers, and I can update them on the fly. I can move them around between the compute platforms in the vehicle as I need to bring new applications into the car. You've now got a platform that you can realize the conversation we had a minute ago with OTA and new applications. If you don't build that, you're going to try to continuously update a monolithic application, updating all the software every time you deploy it. It's unsustainable, and that's why the IT and enterprise industries and telco industries went to cloud native, because they faced the same exact problems. We need to change our software constantly. We need to update it for security threats and CVEs. We need it to be modular. And this is the architecture that they implemented in order to achieve that. We get the benefit in the automotive industry of learning from that and implementing a similar thing in the vehicle. So that's pretty exciting for us.
Yeah, and that's great stuff. And that sort of ever-evolving platform and ability to keep things fresh provides all kinds of interesting opportunities for automakers like Honda to continue to engage with customers and learn from customers and keep them happy, keep them satisfied, even second and third customers. So
I just want to add the challenges portion from a UX. One thing we should be mindful as we're building new cars is managing complexity. We cannot go the direction of, let's say, ADAS, we were talking about it earlier. The idea that the system will do it till it can, and it'll tell you, chill, relax, I got it, but then the minute you cannot get it, you say you're supposed to take a handoff, is meaning you're shifting the complexity onto the driver at the point that they're least prepared. So as we're thinking about the hows of doing it, we should also be mindful about how we're managing these new complex systems, and is the user ready to handle it? And it's important to kind of bring them along versus expect them to bridge the gap. So that's a challenge we should be keeping in mind as we're evolving the technology.
Yeah, it's interesting you raise that point, because I actually believe that in all the complexity that we're talking about in this implementation, this should be largely invisible to the user, right? It has to be a seamless experience.
Right.
As soon as you add complexity, whether you're talking about your mom taking a new car or whatever, they can't operate it, right? It's too complex. You really can't have the human in the loop with respect to these software updates and the changing platform behaviors. That needs to be invisible. I'll give you another example I think that's really interesting that's evolving as we talk about a software-defined vehicle architecture and a connected vehicle architecture, there are applications like compute offload, right? We have a ever-increasing cost basis in the bill of materials in the vehicle, and that's problematic for the industry, right? We can't just keep pouring compute into the car, and then the car sits there in the driveway for 50% or 80% of its life and doesn't use the compute. And so some of the things we're looking at are dynamic compute offload. Once you have a containerized platform in the vehicle, I can now offload that compute to Verizon or T-Mobile or to a public cloud and dynamically move the software around. That's what data centers do today. Again, that should be invisible to the user, so it's seamless to them. But the experience they have is, hey, I bought a car 5 years ago, but I can still put new applications in this. That new feature that GM or Ford just announced, I can consume that, right? And that's pretty exciting because we're leveraging now the automobile as a networked computer, right, versus a standalone entity. And that transformation in the industry is huge. That's going to bring us into a much more modern era it's like these devices, right?
Yeah, and you mentioned the seamlessness, and that's critical because you mentioned your mom getting a new car. I don't know about the rest of you, but I've gone and helped my parents set up all kinds of technologies over the years, and the challenge is avoiding the addition of new technology requiring the owner to become a sysadmin to be able to use it, right? Yeah. Which is not going to happen. The vast majority of folks just want it to work, right? And it's wonderful it's got these new capabilities, these new features, but if in order to enjoy and utilize the experience, you've got to install 6 packages in a certain order and do all the sorts of things that people who are not neck deep in technology every day don't really know how to or have any interest in doing, then it's all for naught, right? So you've got to be sure that this experience is intuitive, it hides the complexity, and to your point, Paul, that it's invisible, really, other than the improvement in the experience that they have in the car.
Yeah.
Well, the spin-off of that concept is that, technology is ever increasing in the vehicles. My kids, all are as interested in the tech in vehicle as they are in more of the traditional experiences like handling, braking, acceleration, et cetera. So as more technology gets added into the vehicles and changes how we interact with our vehicles, how are we managing the experience? It's safer, it's more entertaining, it's a better place to be, but how are we making sure that it's still focused on enjoying the vehicle as opposed to immersing in technology the same way they get, embedded in, flipping through TikToks on their phone?
For us, as one, the joy of driving is the primary focus. Everything else is an enabler. Because ultimately it's a car, people should get enjoyment out of that experience. And whatever we do is ensuring that remains intact. Even our Passport that was just released, some of the things we tout is the different driving modes and how people can enjoy the vehicle under trail and sport and mud. But so as you can see, our focus is about driving. And the interaction should be in the background. We are striving to make the enabling aspect as invisible so that they can have a comfortable, safe experience.
And I think, again, coming from a bit of a technology side, the thing I think about for that in-cabin experience is what actually makes it better for a human being, right? And there's lots of things that go on in a car, as we all know, right? You may be distracted by your child in the back or stressed because of the weather and you can't see. And I think there's some decisions these advanced systems can start making that are actually going to save lives and really improve that experience on a day-to-day basis for people that are in high-stress commute situations and this sort of thing, where, for example, a self-driving system can its algorithm based on, I'm wondering if my mic is going out here, can manipulate its algorithms based on the risk, right, and the behavior inside the vehicle. If you have in-cabin monitoring and cameras watching the occupant is distracted, and the self-driving system was, based on risk exterior to the vehicle and what it can resolve, was going to hand over control to the user. Maybe that's not the right thing to do at that time, because that user is actually less safe to take over the vehicle than the self-driving algorithm in the ADAS platform. So I think the in-cabin monitoring And the application of AI and machine learning to look at what the user is doing and look at what's going on in the vehicle. You know, we have to be careful with invasion of privacy and pulling data out of the car and all that, but at the same time, it's going to save lives, right? And it's going to make the driving experience much better for people and much safer for people as we start using these technologies in the car.
Yeah, and I think it's important, Shruti, the point that you make is this is still about the driving experience, right? The title is elevating the driving experience with superior UX, not replacing or displacing the driver experience, right? So all too often, if we think of technology, you think about your smartphone, your mobile devices, and the intention of an experience like that is to be immersive, right? Everything else goes away and you dive in. And that shouldn't be how technology in the vehicle works, because that is displacing and disconnecting folks from the driving experience as opposed to enhancing and supporting it. Now, it's one thing if you're in a fully autonomous scenario or back seat or something where you don't have to engage as much with the outside world, but for the driver, ensuring that joy of driving the vehicle is still there is an important factor, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a couple other interesting things too. I know we have automotive OEMs and industry in the audience here. We know that the branded experience of the car comes through that user interface. So also ensuring that the software that we deliver into the industry enables an automotive OEM to transform that experience, but still leverage the common software that's been delivered to multiple vehicles and fleets, nationally, right? And I think that's really important because you've got to respect the automotive OEM's desire to have that look and feel that they particularly want that consumer to experience. And then the next level of that is, well, what about driver personalization, right? There are certain things that the driver wants to experience, and the way the driver wants things configured, you have to support that as well within that user interface context that OEM wants you to perceive. And so delivering in-cabin systems that achieve those goals while connected to this back-end infrastructure that we're talking about, I think is really important, because we have to deliver products that are flexible enough that allow the end user what they want and the automotive OEM what they need in order to pursue their brand ambitions.
I want to touch on something that sometimes in a technology conference environment, people don't necessarily want to think about, but all of this technology doesn't come for free, right? So there is an expense in adding compute to a vehicle. There's an expense in adding cameras and sensors and all of these capabilities. They're wonderful things, greatly improve the driver experience. There's got to be a business model around those that makes sense as well, that works for everybody. Otherwise, there's just no way to get them into the vehicles. All of us with OEM backgrounds have to go learn a useful job instead. So making sure that there's a business model for this sort of connectivity and UX is important. And Shruti, from the OEM standpoint, there are certainly ways to, as much as it might not sound great, but to monetize the addition of these capabilities. But talk a little bit about how you turn the addition of these costs in the vehicle into an experience that helps the company stay profitable while keeping the customers happy.
I think, coming from a customer perspective, we should strive on enabling their driving experiences to be seamless. Whatever, we've spoken about it all these 2 days. The focus should be that. And the result of that should be them, coming back to us to buy cars again, loyalty. I think at least as a customer UX person, I would focus on just delivering value in that sense and striving to make the experiences as valuable as possible.
Yeah,
And whatever there should be a win in it. They should get something out of it, and that's what we should focus on.
Yeah, I mean, customer loyalty, customer satisfaction and customer loyalty go hand in hand, and keeping customers in a long-term relationship where they'll repurchase the vehicle, they'll recommend the vehicle, and it's a part of their lives is critical, as an automaker to long-term health of the company and connection with your customers, right? Which is fantastic. Another side of it is, as we've got these systems in place, Paul, you touched a little bit on, other opportunities, whether it's shared compute or, other capabilities, but there's other ways to help defray the cost of putting all these technologies in the vehicles and create some other revenue opportunities that can help justify embedding a lot of these technologies in a vehicle.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, to be honest, I don't think this industry knows yet what that answer is. right? Just to be frank about it. The business models are complex. You know, we can pick on BMW a little, and I feel good doing it because I drive it. I love the car, right? But, you know, the whole heated seat thing that came out, right?
Subscription.
And so how do we monetize things via subscription to the end user? Well, that may not be the only way things are monetized, right? If we look at connected vehicle and things like CV2X, where we're going to have vehicle-to-vehicle information sharing, we're going to have a connected contract with a cellular service provider. They're going to expect money for that. That money is likely going to flow from an automotive OEM to that service provider, but then the end user is involved in a subscription that may be paid to that vehicle, right? There may be certain applications that we look at CV2X where things are maybe accident avoidance related. You know, you have the ability to do emergency vehicle detection or avoidance of oncoming accidents because you're sharing data between the vehicles. That may become competitive table stakes, right? If you know, it becomes a feature war in the industry where OEM 1 produces this capability and people flock to that manufacturer because of that capability. The other manufacturers are going to add it. So you get a bit of an arms race with some of this that happens. That goes into the cost basis of the vehicle. And then finally, you do have the subscription-based capabilities for things that are perhaps infotainment related or content delivery related that happen in the vehicle. So I think the reality is, A, we don't know because it's early days in implementing these advanced applications and monetization things. We're going to have some failures, you know, like the example that I quoted. But in the end, it's going to be a complex business model with multiple parties and the money going different ways depending on what that application is. And I think that's going to be hard to avoid.
Well, I think there's opportunity as well for, you know, we've talked about personalization a bit for, you know, more in-depth personalization of customer experience. You mentioned, you know, off-roading and that sort of, so you can have a community of folks that are really interested in a particular lifestyle use for their vehicle, and, you know, you can offer them the capabilities to, you know, whether it be, you know, folks that want to do sport and track driving or off-road driving or things of that nature, which, you know, people are willing to pay a little bit extra for a unique and in-depth experience that's aligned with, you know, what they're interested in doing.
That's just an example of, like what I was saying, it's a win. It should truly feel like they're getting additional value. And then, I guess, we can talk about, I still want to, you know, focus just on what it is that we can give as value, how it can be is for the business folks to figure out.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, well, at this point, I'd like to turn and hear a little bit from the audience, folks that have got questions. I believe we've got a microphone that's going to come around. I think I see one up front here, Louis.
Thank you. My name is Hussam. I've been part of the OEM world, and it's very exciting to see you kind of talk about integrating different technologies from different tech stacks and leveraging OTA for another acronym, but leveraging OTA to be more personalized with the use of ADAS and looking into your driving habits and your demographics of where you're driving and adapting the technologies to it. In a world where the systems are very complex, where, you know, there's Aptiv, Wind River, and the OEM capabilities, would love to maybe hear your thoughts in terms of how these technologies integrate together in order to truly save lives, because you know, accidents are very hard to prevent, especially with these lovely cell phones that people carry while they're driving the whole time.
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of things there. One is that as we learn from other industries that have built massively complex software implementations, right? Frankly, that's where this industry is headed. Software-defined vehicle is going to get to many, many millions of lines of code, tens of millions of lines of code in the vehicle. And you've got to manage that complexity. And some of the safety question that you answer, it's answered by ISO 26262 and in our aircraft space, DO 178 DAL-A and these kind of standards. But complexity creates risk, right? And the way that this was handled in other industries is through concepts like microservices, right? You have to get away from an implementation in software that's monolithic. You get a million lines of code in a single piece of software versus break it up into its components and establish clearly defined APIs and have small modules. Now what you've got is you've got contained risk for a particular function to a smaller code base. And so I do think that, you know, I talked a little bit earlier about what the platform needs to look like in order to implement this. But that platform merely implements a cloud native environment. Now the applications that come in have to be designed correctly from a software design standpoint to embrace modern software principles that produce that stability. And then, of course, you have to leverage the mixed criticality environment that you need in a vehicle in order to implement the right functions on a safety-certified operating system. Other functions may sit on Linux and Android because they're less critical, but they communicate now over a network instead of inter-process communications, right? And that's a big transformation, I think, for this industry. But as you look at a more data-centric architecture where these things are built at this level of scale, communications are through container network interfaces, through standardized APIs, across multiple OS instances. The multiple OS instances create the safety isolation. This OS can go down and my safety critical function keeps going. The entire OS can go down, right? And that's different than some of our competitors that mix criticality within the OS. We think that's very dangerous, and that's why we don't use it on aircraft, because people tend to frown on aircraft dropping out of the sky, right? So we take a bit of a more rigid, and you all appreciate that as you leave here. When you get on the Boeing or Airbus, that's Wind River software you're running on, right? So we take a much more rigid safety critical look because of that background that we have in aerospace and defense, and we apply that to the automotive sector. And that results in both guidance for our customers that we can do consultatively to say, hey, here's how you should build your applications in that vehicle, or consume them from Aptiv because they're built that way, right? They're built the correct way to operate in a safety critical environment, even though it's much, much more complex piece of software than we used to have.
Thanks, Paul. And I'll zoom out a little bit. And one of the last things you talked about was because people are messing around with their mobile devices, right? We've all seen it, and we've all yelled at that other driver, and we've probably all maybe been that driver at one point or another, right? But I think one of the important things, and a lot of what we're talking about up here, is enabling an in-vehicle experience that reduces the desire for the driver to pick up their mobile phone, right? People work around the in-vehicle experience and use their mobile phones because it's easier for them to do so. If we can have a UX in the vehicle that meets their needs, that enhances the driver experience, that supports what they want to do, there's less and less need for them to pull out a mobile device and do things in a less safe way.
Good question.
Thanks for the question. We got another? It's a room full of folks that want to go home, and I can totally appreciate that. So, thank you everybody for your time. I very much want to thank Paul and Shruti for joining me up here on stage today, so let's give them a round of applause.
Thanks.
So, enjoyed being here. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.